Hi, I'm Michael Casey, the Chief Content Officer at CoinDesk. I think we've got a tremendous panel here, in part because I think each one of them represents or is able to speak to these different sort of components of what the, I suppose the new architecture of money writ large is likely to look like, or may look like, because we really don't know, right? This approaching the future of money is a good way to describe it, because it implies that when you have a title that says the future of money by X, it's like this very arrogant notion that you know what the future holds, and we don't. But we have, I think, an interesting take on the present, at least, amongst these four, which can sort of be something of a roadmap. So very quickly, just grab them line, introduce yourselves, and so that everyone has a sense of what you bring to the table.
Jen Lassiter, Executive Director for the Digital Dollar Project. We are a nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C., focused on research and exploration of a U.S. central bank digital currency.
Hi, Kevin Mole. I'm the head of digital assets at Western Union. I won't describe Western Union. I think you all may have used it or know about us. For a long time, Western Union has not done much in innovation, particularly with regards to blockchain or cryptocurrency. I joined 7 months ago to change all that. And we are part of the Digital Dollar Project, but we are also launching a product in the next couple of months. You'll see from us for our customers. And I believe that the future of money looks a lot like, well, actually, I'll answer that question later, because it does involve Western Union. So I'll give the practical...
Western Union is the future of money. There you go. Done. We'll leave. It is not, by the way.
It's cash. It's all cash. Yep.
Well, considering Western Union started at the beginning of communications, I think that's absolutely appropriate. So I'm Charlie Giancarlo. I am the CEO of a company called Pure Storage. I'm also the co-founder of the Digital Dollar Foundation and then the Digital Dollar Project. Part of the reason why I'm here, perhaps, is that my career actually spans communications. I was involved in developing internet technology from before the internet became commercial, so that starts to, I'm giving away my age here, and really all the way through the development of the internet. And just to comment a little bit, upon not knowing what the future is like, we may know a little bit of what the future is like, just not all of it. So when as we were developing the different internet technologies, we, the people that were involved in it, when at a time when most of the general public was not, we knew that eventually every bit of communications would flow on the internet. We just didn't know there'd be Twitter. We didn't know there would be, Facebook, right? That we didn't know. But so we know a little bit. We know that the future of money is digital. We just don't know everything that it's going to be able to do.
You've aged very well. I feel like I've gone the other way. I also feel like I founded Accenture's blockchain business back in 2015. We were talking before, actually. Our very first client in that business was a central bank. So we've been at the whole digital currency space from the beginning. A couple years later, I rolled in our augmented and virtual reality practice. We call it extended reality, and have been managing the two next to each other for some time. And lo and behold, over the past 18 months, we got a word for that. So now I lead Accenture's metaverse business globally, bringing together all of the wonderful tokenization of identity, money, and objects, together with the immersive experience to reframe the entire digital world around us. And so I will shorten my title for Sandra on our materials.
So I think I'd like to start, maybe one way I'd like to frame this is, again, I talk about this sort of broad architecture, and there are many pieces to it. And so, I think somebody like Charlie can talk to the underlying internet architecture and open protocols that are used to sort of initially for communications, but now for money, as actually literally a form of communication. I actually also think, though, that if you think about it, the dollar, or any currency for that matter, is a protocol. It's a language, it's a mechanism by which we understand the world, and then people can build on top of that. Entire civilizations get built on the protocols of money. So the whole digital dollar project as well is sort of there. But then you've got the application layer, and so we've got, David can talk to wallets and how important they are going to be in the future for how people actually interact with this future of money. And then, good old Western Union being there as an interface between, different parts of the old and the new, and sort of being part of the last mile, I suppose. So I think let's just sort of use that as a framework for understanding how this conversation goes. And I'm going to throw to you first, Jen, because we've talked a bit about how and I think really Charlie's brother Chris Giancarlo, for those of you who don't know, the former chairman of the CFTC, and I've known Chris for some time, and very early on when he was thinking about these things, I think everybody was assuming that public money in a digital form would be issued by a central bank. It would be a CBDC in that classic sense of a ledger that's run by a bank. And now we're in a quite different environment where everyone's talking about stable coins and open systems and so forth. We don't know which one wins and so forth, but like maybe you can talk to what that landscape's looking at like now with these multiple different versions of what a protocol for a public money currency looks like.
Thank you. Chris Giancarlo is also our executive chairman at Digital Dollar Project. It's wonderful to learn along with these leaders. So I love that there are stablecoins, cryptocurrencies, and CBDCs globally, some in use in real life use cases today. I think it's a very natural arc if you are prioritizing functional needs and user needs at the beginning of your design session, right? So we were talking earlier, as Dave just mentioned, central banks being one of the first raising of the hand when we're talking about digital money. It takes a long time for a lot of reasons, financial stability across the world being one of them, for central banks to mobilize and innovate and pair regulation along with the technical innovation. It is no surprise that as cryptocurrencies started to uptick in use, that stablecoins became an innovation that helped people move between an analog world and a digital world based on blockchain. What they look like in the future, to me, is the really fun piece, because I think competition is really healthy. And I think as we start to see central banks understanding, one, if they should even issue a CBDC, right? So we hope they're also outcome driven. And if they decide to, what are the design choices they're making so that those CBDCs are interoperable with stablecoins, with cryptocurrencies, with the multitude of wallets that Dave will talk about in the future, and create competition so that consumers have choice and organizations have choice, and we make it very easy for them to be able to transact. So I am excited because a lot of the work that Digital Dollar Project is doing is that exact experimentation. So how do we understand what principles will drive our outcomes that we're looking for in this digital future, which technical and policy choices countries can make to get them there. But it doesn't feel binary to me.
Yeah, okay. Although it's interesting, I think some people, again, projecting into a future that we still don't exactly know, are suggesting that the central banks may be the ones that issue this sort of wholesale digital currency that is used as the clearing mechanism between banks and so forth. And that seems like a role that the governments should play. But then pushing out to the private sector, the sort of public-facing, much more innovative optionality that lies with different types of stablecoins. So in the spirit of that, Charlie, I mean, the argument for that model, certainly the latter part of it, is that with open architectures, again, we can do so much more. We're unbounded by the creativity and the access, and therefore, all the stuff that could be built on these new systems. Talk a little bit about that. Like, what do you see? Again, getting a crystal ball for now, using this sort of like extensible open model for the development of new forms of money.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I really foresee a very heterogeneous environment in terms of the future of money. We often talk about a two-tier banking system. We're really going to be talking about a multi-tier environment, for how money is managed, exchanged, saved, invested, and so forth. And it'll go beyond money. It'll go to instruments that represent money, such as stock certificates, right? Such as bond holdings and so forth. And in order to be able to encourage all of that, first of all, you have to have both open source, so people can share code and be able to be compatible with one another. But you also have to encourage completely proprietary environments, right? Companies get started and operate based on proprietary software upon which they build proprietary businesses. But if you have that blend, how does everybody get along? Right now, the very interesting thing is, how do we have interoperability, let's say, between a Bitcoin and stable coins, or between one currency and another right now? it's all through the US dollar, or at the very least, it's through an exchange of paper currency. Okay, paper currency is still the common canonical form, all right? Well, in order for us to get from where we are today, to an environment where all of these different forms of money and services, to where they can openly exchange with one another, because we all utilize money in many different ways. The only way to do that is with common protocols between these different software elements. Those common protocols have to be standardized, they have to be agreed to, they have to be developed over time. I mean, just like we went from a wide variety of different protocols on the internet to higher layer protocols allowing, for, exchange of different types of information, be they tweets, be they, the ability to provide, programming for things such as Web 2 and now Web 3. These are all agreements between companies as to standard protocols as to how they interoperate. Where we are right now in our development of crypto, whether it's CBDC or other things, is we largely have, even if it's open source, but proprietary software operating each one of these different forms of currency. And again, they don't interoperate; they interoperate through paper currency, through the dollar. It seems very crude, right? We have to take that next step where they can interoperate with one another through common protocols. And so I really see that as we're only at crypto 1.5 right now. We have to get to crypto 2.0.
And not to put too fine a point on it, I mean, what that means is what it has meant until now, this interface with the dollar, is the development of crypto exchanges, the likes of which have just all blown up in the context of having to be these custodians of our money. FTX, I've probably heard those three letters said way too often in the last few weeks. But it is a reminder that this interoperability challenge is in fact something that's extremely important for the sake of the security of the system as well. But before we bring in the other two, just back to you then, Jen. What I know interoperability is a huge concern of yours right now. What are the options that are out there? I mean, we know about certain interoperability protocols with the blockchain space, the Cosmos, the Polkadots, et cetera. I mean, but this is something that's going to need governments and others to participate in. So what does it look like? The solution. What is the actual, protocol solution that would get us there?
I'll take one quick moment just to distinguish that a central bank digital currency is not a cryptocurrency. I think that's important as how we're using our language and applying it here. There's an assumption in calling it a cryptocurrency that it is maybe DLT-based in structure and design. That is yet to be seen. Of course, DDP would love to see a tokenized version of a digital dollar. To your point, I don't know what the exact protocol is, but I do know what it means to convene groups and to bring them together to define outcomes and work towards those outcomes collaboratively. So when Digital Dollar Project was started, one of the catalysts that we set out to achieve was to make sure that the Federal Reserve wasn't designing in a silo behind closed doors, not engaging publicly, or with our private sector resources, right? Folks who have long been prioritizing the end user in their product development. So for Digital Dollar Project, it's taking it out of the government-only convenings. This is a really great example where we are this week, which is seeing academia and NGOs and private sector players and government players together talking about how to solve problems together because they're big, hard, systemic, societal shifting problems. You don't do that alone, or you can choose to, of course, as some countries have. They'll remain unnamed. So I think when it comes to this, again, because finance is just one piece of what collaboratively developing protocols would serve, it starts with having our private sector stakeholders and our government officials together defining what outcomes it is that they would like to achieve, and then starting to set roadmaps, very MVP style. We don't need to solve all the problems. We can have a North Star that will change and shift as technology and needs of our public change and shift as well. But how do we incrementally work to get there together? I would love to see public-private partnership in the development of a digital dollar. I think the US has a great history in utilizing that mode for collaboration to do these very big societal shifting things. And we saw a little bit of that with MIT and the Project Hamilton work, but that is really where we think we'd be able to bring the expertise and the resources of the private sector to bear for government good, for public money.
Okay, so we've sort of talked here about, I think what I would say is the back end, right? In a way, these are the back end problems. The wallet is going to be the public-facing element of this, and the key point here is that these are the human beings. And we know now that, and we've known for some time, but it gets taken to a new level that once our transactions, be they communication transactions or things, or literally payments for things, are digitized, it's a record that gets traced, right? So this human element of privacy, this is really, really important. So David, what do you think the wallet that becomes this key intersection between me and this money system that these guys are describing, what does it look like?
I'll get to a little bit of what it looks like, but maybe just to widen the aperture even further than that. I think we've done ourselves generally a disservice in our part of the innovation wave around digital currency, where we've stayed in the swim lane and we've stuck with what the systems of record are for digital currency and all the discussion we've just been having. There's a whole nother community that we're a part of that's doing the same for digital identity. And lo and behold, identity and transactions are inextricably linked. And then I would throw in digital objects and all of the tokenization of objects, whether it's the wildly popularized and hyped collectible space, all the way through to car title, land title, home title, goods that you'll wear in the metaverse. What we're pushing for, exactly to your point, is what we've neglected is that lovable user experience to recognize that what I really need in the digital world is to be able to move around the digital world in the same way that I move around the physical world with physical tokens. Right, so if I, sometimes I literally pull my wallet out of my pocket and I say, look, I navigate the physical world with a token from the DMV that's my identity, token of my credit relationships, credit worthiness for my banks, token of my central bank liabilities and my physical cash, and in the physical world, I'm in full control. I can go in one store to an authority, border crossing, whatever it is. I can say hi to the cop who taps on my window because I was driving too fast. It's all somewhat in my control to remove what element of my identity, money, and objects I want in the physical world. I'm in control. I share that with others intentionally and have some degree of privacy if I don't want to pull those things out of my wallet. We have none of that in the current digital world. In the current digital world, to get service from any service provider or authority, you give all of it away. You have to sign up, even in a retail transaction. At the end of it, you're giving your shipping information and credit card information to pay for the goods that you just bought. We are constantly giving all of our data away. And so, part of what yesterday we hosted a session around the Linux Open Wallet Foundation to really wave in all of the existing wallet focus that would integrate the tokenization of identity, money, and objects, and then to your question around what it looks like, give it an interface that will only be successful if it simplifies our experience, right? So, like it or love it or hate it, the whole Apple Pay and their wallets and the integration of the credit cards and that kind of tap to pay, you can now go all the way through the New York subway system and just tap a phone, they made it simple. And so what's imperative upon us is to think through that combination of the business interactions, the B2C, B2B, all types of interactions that take, that require really lovable, simple use of tokenization of identity, money, and objects, and make it simple first, and then as much as we can make that interface lovable. Someone made the joke yesterday, right? Maybe our worst example is the recovery passwords we're using in the current wallet infrastructure. We've got to just make it simple and lovable. Otherwise, it won't scale. We'll continue to innovate for each other in a highly technical community that's very inwardly focused on innovation. And we don't understand why the rest. I don't understand why my parents have trouble downloading a wallet and buying a digital asset that I recommend. It's mind blowing that they might actually need a call center to call to ask a question. So simple, lovable. Think about that point of engagement, and then the places as engaging of an environment as possible to get the scale that we need.
But having with strong privacy protections, right? I mean, so it's just like a structure that, to your point about being in control, can't be. You're the one that's sort of. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, right? Because it goes beyond just the money. This is literally how do I. I'm the one that's giving out the access to the information that you need to credentials and so forth, right?
Yeah, we all should be in control of what do we share with whom for how long, and have the ability to sever the relationship and revoke all of the all of the requirements of GDPR, California privacy, or just our base social and cultural values that do play out differently across the world. They have, obviously this all has to align to choices that'll get made in different communities, but that privacy is you referenced and Jen made reference to is incredibly important, because it's, not only were we frustrated with we kind of gave up on privacy a while ago, right? We just assumed that we don't have any, and kind of only got mildly irritated with the data breach at like the big brand that happened. And I think we've got such a brighter future in this new model of self-managed tokenization of identity, money, and objects. So yes, it's central to the design.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not just because we gave up on it, but what we did actually also recognise that there were these risks around it. So we put massive layers of bureaucracy around that, and that's just made the whole thing more, all the more inefficient. Kevin, look, cash is the classic sort of privacy outlet, right? And Brett Scott, if you know this activist who's sort of out there saying, forget digital money, cash is the future, because it's the only, really sort of rebellious protocol that's out there that no one can actually trace. More to the point, it's also something that some people have to have. They literally don't have the identity, they don't have that wallet, they can't get in and can't get the credentials they need. So this is it. So how does Western Union, which has traditionally been in that space of getting the cash out, fit into this digital architecture?
Yeah, and I'm not going to tell you that cash is the future. I think that the more and more of our customers are showing that they have the ability to transact through digital means. It could be mobile money, it could be a smartphone access to a wallet. And so the world is headed towards digital. I think it's important. I don't know. I was going to read a tweet from Elon Musk of all people, but let's keep this fun.
You guys have heard of Elon Musk?
The reason I wouldn't normally do this, but it came in literally 2 days ago. As I was thinking about this panel, it was just so relevant. So let me read it. It said, first it was a reply to a tweet from the World of Statistics that said more than 90% of all money, that's more than $50 trillion appearing in our account, exists only on computer servers. The sum total of coins and banknotes is less than $6 trillion. He responds, exactly. Money is actually a set of heterogeneous databases with vast amounts of legacy code, still using COBOL on mainframes in batch mode. We use mainframes at our agent locations. We are far behind. We deal in cash, but we are far behind on technology, and our customers bear the brunt of it. I got into this space because 12 years ago, I was working in Dubai, standing in line, talking to people, transferring money home to Pakistan and India. They were in line 30, 45 minutes once a week, and they go and they get charged 7% on cash that's going to show up 7 days later. That's not good enough. And here's what can happen for the future of money. Money, medium of exchange. Before it used to be gold, let's say at some point gold was, and then it realized gold is just too bulky, it's heavy, it's really a bad medium exchange, but it's a really good store of value. And we could back up the US dollar with gold. And the US dollar is slightly better medium of exchange, some of it being digital, some of it being cash that you could carry around in really light paper form. So the central banks now can take a role where they say, you know what, we can become the world's best store of value, or we can become the world's best medium of exchange. What's happening right now in blockchain is people realizing the US dollar is not a very good medium of exchange. We need to build a stablecoin. We need to build something that can transfer fast, easily. And we could back it by US dollar. So is the US dollar or some other euro going to be the future gold, where we just keep it in vaults and it becomes the Fort Knox and everybody abstract on top of it to create the lovable experience for our customers? Or are they going to, the part of the reason we're involved in Digital Dollar Project is I would like us to fix the back end so that really we think of as fiat as a layer one technology. A layer one technology provides all the applications and services that can provide this lovable experience, but still be backed by this fiat currency, which is not going away, but going to really deliver value of speed, efficiency, low cost for those folks that are my customer at the end of the day. We will continue to deliver where they're at, how they're at, whether that's cash or other forms, but we want to get them into the world where they're not standing 30 minutes in line, paying 7%, and getting the cash out on the other end 7 days later. I don't know if that answered your direct question, but it was a
great visionary way.
If I could just jump in,
Sure.
Your analogy is exactly right. We, by the way, we feel very bad for those people standing in line paying 7%. We all pay approximately 3% for our digital transactions. Now, you may not feel it directly because maybe you pay your credit card at the end of the month, but the people you're buying your goods from are paying the 3%, which means, guess what? You're paying 3% more. So we, for the digital exchange we're doing right now, we're all paying 3%. And our hope, and I think it's fairly straightforward to assume that once we take the account system out of exchanging money, that it won't be zero, but that 3% will come down a lot.
Right. Yeah. Do I open this up to questions, Abdul? Is that?
Can I add one thing, Michael, before?
Before I do, I was going to throw you on the question.
You got 15 minutes, so you can go for more questions.
Yeah, I was just trying to see what the structure was. Okay, no, jump in, Jen.
I was just going to sync these two conversations, which is to say, so my crystal ball is whoever figures out privacy, and that is baked into the technology of a CBDC or a stablecoin is going to be the competitive winner, commercially speaking. But in times of crisis, as we've described a little bit here, privacy becomes even more important. So I think really experimenting and understanding both the mandate of the central banks to serve their citizens and meet them where they're at, which is in this future digital space, and the application of privacy-enhancing technologies, which are still very much evolving. I think we have an idea of what they do today, an inkling of what they might do in the future, but the future looks very bright. And taking the time to be able to find that balance between security and privacy and codifying that into your CBDC, central bank digital currency, is important. And if it is a DLT-based central bank digital currency, you have the option then also to have those privacy standards for stablecoins and potentially cryptocurrencies as well. So that's my hypothesis.
Okay. Unfortunately, a lot of these questions always end up going back towards policy and regulation, but I think we need to go there. I'm trying to do it in a different context here. I was on a panel with Neil Ferguson yesterday, similar kind of themes, actually. And we talked a little bit about what the future of the international monetary system might look like in an environment where it's being challenged by cleavages in the geopolitical structure, war, etc., and therefore the hegemony of the dollar as a question. Thrown into this sort of international competition construct with China obviously leading the way around a CBDC, I'd say, or at least one of the first ones to roll it out on scale, and presumably with a very different vision for what its money serves in a digital context than one that might be more pro-privacy. So I suppose my question, and you're actually talking about convening around these things, Jen, so it is back to you, but it might also be the perspective of David. Accenture obviously talks to governments all around the world. Is there at all any emerging consensus on what the principles should be behind these new forms of money with regards to privacy, with regards to interoperability, right? Do you feel as if governments are getting the need to come together and find standards, or are they all just still off doing their own thing?
Yeah, so let's say, because privacy could be many different things. So if you break down a transaction, or at least money, into three areas, there's the transaction itself, there's the balance in a wallet, and there's the identity of the individual or the counterparty in that transaction, right? I think a lot of people would agree that we need to keep private individuals unless, whether it's a Western Union or other intermediary are playing the role of identification, which is really important with regards to anti-money laundering. We're not going to get rid of those, but the rest of the world shouldn't know that Kevin Moll is sending money to his aunt in Spain, So that's the transaction I think should be, at least the identity should be private. If you think about the transaction itself, okay, they may see, the world may see a particular transaction was left the US and ended up in Spain, and that may be okay. I think a lot of, if you read MICA and you think about the euro, they're like, that's okay, and the central bank is okay knowing that. The question is, the balance of these accounts, and I think this is the tricky part, is like, do we see money flows in and out of accounts and certain balances being changed in a way that is creating some sort of like question mark for the regulators, and therefore they need to step in and do something about it? I have a contrarian point of view, which is, hey, do we need to solve for punishing criminals through the financial system, or can we solve punishing criminals through their crimes? Right? Elizabeth Holmes went to jail because she committed wire fraud. Al Capone was in jail because of taxes, not because he killed people or that he was giving alcohol to people during Prohibition. So, how can we punish crimes? Can we use blockchain in a way that's preserving the privacy of the individual, but yet still tracing money in a way that actually makes them support punishment for criminal activity? I think we can.
So, decriminalizing money, not a bad idea.
Maybe just a totally different facet to it, because you asked, the interoperability point, importantly, I'm finding more and more in different conversations the need to add a word to interoperability, because it can mean so many different things to different folks. I was just watching another panel over in the Congress Center where they were talking about interoperability for about 15 minutes, and what they actually meant was integration, because it was how do we integrate these new forms of currency into the existing legacy systems, because we can't just it's not going to be a binary flip a switch and old to new. So I've always, and then I had a wonderful argument with someone that neither of us realized we were arguing, because she was talking on a panel about policy interoperability, and I was talking about technical interoperability, and we didn't realize it, but because we were just using that word. So if I try to get more specific, I think one of the things that's really encouraging is that and even in some of the sessions this week, is that the central banks are getting together and recognizing that if they can't just innovate in isolation behind, within their domestic infrastructure, and you're seeing these wonderful partnerings and pairings challenging long-held orthodoxies. Like, Project Jura challenged the long-held orthodoxy that you can only clear fiat currency in the domestic architecture, that actually through the use of blockchain, you could have a degree of comfort in seeing the transaction happen in a foreign jurisdiction, and suddenly the whole notion of a cross-border payment is fundamentally different, and you get to that, maybe not race to free, but race to much lower cost movement of money cross borders at the wholesale or small, large or small payment structures. And so I'm encouraged to see that degree of creativity coming from the central banks. And then the other thing that went along with it, which is super important, is they all agreed. I've heard them unanimously agree that it has to be a public-private partnership, that they can't just turn within themselves and code it and then unveil it. That the partnership, with everyone from end users, who to Kevin's, some of Kevin's user population at the most disenfranchised, who have to use physical cash, all the way through to the big commercial wholesale bank infrastructure. Having that full spectrum of participation in the design is important. So I'm encouraged by all of that. That obviously plays a part in the slowness, the steadiness that's happening, which on a day-to-day basis is frustrating. But maybe if we took enough of a step back, we would see they're actually moving at quite a fast clip for
them,
for who they are.
Yeah, I might jump in as well, especially on something that Kevin mentioned, which is that we talk about CBDC as if it's one thing. For example, China, jumping out in front. Well, that is a CBDC. And they've made design decisions, and unsurprisingly, they made design decisions that really focused on state control of being able to look for illicit activity. But actually, they went much further than that. They actually looked to being able to incent their population to behave a certain way and disincent them from behaving another way. I think we, as I'll say, as the free world, we need to look at a very different CBDC, and I think we need to approach it from the standpoint of our citizens. And the the state needs to worry, we shouldn't be overly worried about how the state controls things, in my opinion, such as money laundering. That's their job. We shouldn't be making it easy specifically for that in the CBDC, because then it's the camel's nose under the tent. We really need to be focused on privacy. We need to be focused on ease of use, on flexibility, on speed. And let the government worry. It's their job to worry about money laundering and so forth, and they can figure that out. But the assumptions we put into place, well, let me go back to the internet. It's the assumptions that we put into place initially in the internet, both good and bad assumptions, that govern the way it operates today. You know, the way the Chinese run the internet, they've got the Great Firewall, they've got a number of other things, but the internet was based on the assumption of open communications. And what that means is the internet's very leaky. It's very hard to control, you know, even for the Chinese. It also, unfortunately, allows for a lot of the lack of security that we have today in the internet, because it was based on trust, right? Well, we're going to make certain assumptions, good and bad, in terms of the structure of CBDC and all of the protocols and all of the instruments that we create. And I would posit that we should do it for an open society, not for a closed one.
I think you're probably going to find a lot of agreement amongst this audience to that, but it's the. Just want to pick up on the one thing you said about that. It's the government's role to worry about, you know, anti-money laundering. There's no reason why you folks, as the designers of this, should be enabling that. Let them figure that out. I think part of the problem, of course, though, is that right now, one element of the sort of political approach to this, and we might call it the backlash, amongst certain members of the left and perhaps the right, is that this is the core problem of cryptocurrencies. That, you know, money laundering and you know, illicit activity is the core problem, and that's what we need to regulate. And you hear it over and over and over again. So, I mean, how do we, you know, get the conversation around what Charles is saying, Jen?
So one, I think there's a difference between talking points and sitting down and having a substantive conversation about what concerns are around AML, KYC, for one example, right? How do we perform our remit that has been given to us by law to date as law enforcement over financial transactions? I do think it is a lot about education and dispelling myths at this level. I also think one of the really cool opportunities, right, we've talked about completely reimagining how our financial infrastructure is built today as to how it might be in this future. The challenge in front of all governments is reimagining how your regulatory system would have to be restructured to meet the needs of this digital future. We haven't done that in the US for 100-ish years, and it's really hard as a civil servant to find the resources to spend the time to learn and understand what the impact will be, the same way that the private sector is experimenting and learning to understand the impact to their strategy and operations. So I do think spending time on the Hill, not in front of cameras, educational sessions, lunch and learns, practical applications. So this is why I think the experimentation that DDP is doing, which is here is a specific real life use case of a retail application of a central bank digital currency. These are the assumptions we made to run the experiment. This is how we did it, and these are our results. And these are all the litany of 1,000 questions that we want to explore further. But it is that relatability. It's very human, right? And helping them understand how if they don't come along, then they could potentially be irrelevant. So while I don't think we need to solve the problem, we do need to be sensitive to how to help get them to where we are as an industry today.
Yeah, without going into too many of the details, I think it's also imperative that we take this, you know, very unique opportunity as we're re-envisioning the technical architectures to not be stuck in the old orthodoxies, right? So many of the conversations that I get into in this space is how do we apply the onboarding AML KYC requirements to these new digital currency types? And I think that's the dead wrong question. Right? The question, and sorry, and let's just talk first. I've been complicit in 2 industry-wide efforts to try to overhaul AML KYC. Both failed, and they both failed because of a structural problem within the space of the transfer of liability of this risk assessment. But the more fundamental challenge to this whole concept of AML KYC is that it is a one-time evaluation of risk, by and large, when someone first enters into a relationship with a financial provider. They send over 86-ish data elements. The bank makes a call that moment, and I'm free to become a bad actor a week later, and they have to then try to catch through my activity, maybe do a second risk assessment later if they notice something. And so part of what gets opened up as we look at this wallet infrastructure model of having our tokenized identity, money, and objects sitting in a wallet, which I'm going to do it quickly, I apologize, is we can fundamentally rethink the notion of actually embedding that logic into the wallet to perpetually read against the data. So it's an ongoing evaluation of risk, but in the control of me as an end user, because I have the ability to kick that agent out of my wallet if I no longer trust the organization that's doing it. And so I think that is one idea of many of how we could potentially fundamentally rethink the what is ultimately a societal value to try to reduce terrorist funding and financial crime and the like, but we can do it in a way where maybe we could have the best of both worlds of ensuring privacy of the individual, control of the individual, yet the monitoring that's required by central security organizations to respond. So I just, again, I'm just hope for this whole community, we can't let ourselves get locked into the traditional orthodoxies and the swim lanes of what we're designing. We have to be much more creative because the technology is giving us a much more powerful tool to do so.
All right, I think that's 1 more minute. Probably not time for questions, I would think, unless somebody has a quick one that they wanted to throw at it. Tanvi, yes.
I would absolutely agree with what David said. And perhaps answer back to your question, Michael, the regulator should think about what the AML should look like for the digital assets. We tried doing it for traditional finance, and I've spent a big part of my life trying to solve for compliance in AML. It has 99.9% false positives. So this is a unique opportunity.
The worst performing process ever.
Ever. And it's the most expensive. That's what makes the cost of banks and financial institutes the way it is. And if you want it nimble and light and practical and implementable, to David's point, we have to be part of the conversation as the policymakers think about how to regulate and how to put together the policies. Blockchain gives you the transparency, but we are still struggling between what is completely decentralized and what is centralized. And in that space, if we do not have that dialogue ongoing, we'll have another regulations that none of the digital assets categories would be able to comply to, and then we create another monster of how to solve for AML.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tanvi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just one last note. I think that a lot of the injustices and imbalances in the world are in many respects a direct response to the compliance cost of money. I mean, there is de-risking of entire island nations. There are just because banks can't afford to bank them, right? And it's just an incredibly costly way of approaching this. So it's a good call to action from David there, and thanks for adding that final comment, Tanvi. And a round of applause for the panel. Thanks for watching.